So Enzo, welcome, man. It's so exciting to have you, and thanks for being here.
Thanks for having me, Mark. Also super excited. I think you broke the ice. You and I have known each other for some time when I was working at Intercom, and now it just feels so good to be on the other side, but to be able to cross your paths again and have this conversation and of course get the input from Intercom on a lot of things that I've been thinking about after I left, and I'm sure a lot of people have thought about since too. So I think today is going to be a great chat.
Yeah, man, I can't wait. I can't wait. So before we really dive into everything, first, I've already see people in the chat here. Let us know where you're coming in from. I'm here in our San Francisco office. And what we're also going to do is quickly open up one of the polls. If you go to the poll tab, we're just trying to get a sense of some of the things that you're really excited to hear about. And Enzo and I are going to look at that, and it's going to kind of help us to navigate how we spend some of our time and how we kind of navigate our discussion today. So go to the poll, vote in there. Folks that are tuning in live on LinkedIn, unfortunately, you can't take part in the poll, but feel free to drop your answers in the comments if you'd like. Enzo, while folks answer, first, I would love to just get a really quick rundown of what June is.
Yeah, this is a promo instant. I'll make it fast. So we're building what we call next-gen analytics for B2B SaaS. So what that means is we realized that B2B SaaS were lacking analytics for their job, and we're doing that. So what it means is basically you put a June snippet into your web app or mobile app or whatever, and we generate automatically some analytics for you around your product usage. And then we basically do that at a company level, and we integrate very deeply with your CRMs. So your revenue teams can basically, turn product usage into money. And and I guess our vision is to go a bit beyond product analytics in the future. So that's why I started by saying we're at analytics. So stay tuned. There's a lot coming up this year, basically.
Oh, that's really exciting, man. And I know for folks, you were a product manager at Intercom. I was on the product marketing team at that point. So definitely understand kind of the need to understand how people are using your product, where people are maybe getting stuck, kind of the typical things we think about with product analytics. But we also know that there's a pretty common space for like a lot of different companies. So as you're going through this and you're coming up with the idea, well, first, where did the idea come from? And then also, at what point kind of did you decide that this was the idea that you wanted to pursue?
Yeah, great question. So if some of the people listening are in that ideation phase and still wondering when they should leave their job or go full steam on a project, our story I think is pretty classic. So basically before we left Intercom, I was the one trying to look into the data all the time. So I was a product manager, worked for a couple of companies, and I just always struggle to turn raw data into insight. And so I thought I was the only one. I thought, the problem was specific to my company. And I think Intercom did something really, really good for me and for us. It did a lot for us, to be honest. But one thing that it did really well is that Intercom is very, very strong in product management. And so basically, when I started at Intercom and realized that it was actually quite a pain also for Intercom to dig into data and to take decisions based on data and so on, I kind of realized that the problem might be a bit more general than I thought. And so that was kind of like the tipping point, like the cherry on the cake, like, okay, if Intercom hasn't figured it out, probably a lot of people haven't done it. So that's when I kind of realized there was a big problem. And then the rest is more like sequencing and timing, like, okay, if that's the problem, how do you zoom into it? Which sub-problem do you start with? And then, do you need a team to do that? Do you need fundings and so on? And this is more like a sequential exercise that I went through, basically.
Yeah, I know we're going to get to a little bit of that kind of the behind the scenes process. We're going to talk through a lot of the product market fit stuff. Just looking at the results of that first poll, it looks like a lot of folks are looking forward to that kind of product market fit discussion and more of the founder-led stuff. So we'll make sure we focus heavily on those. I'm also going to open up a second poll now. We're just trying to get, again, like a general sense of what size companies. There's a lot of different types of organizations, I'm sure, that are joining in from pre-seed, maybe you're bootstrapped, maybe you've raised a series A, B, or C. Please let us know again, just going to help us make sure we tailor our discussion and questions and responses to be what's most relevant to everybody. So, YC, Enzo, you guys applied and got into Y Combinator. First, what was that just entire experience like for you?
Yeah, the YC experience. So maybe we can touch a bit on accelerator, broadly speaking, here. But I think YC was great for us because I think the biggest enemy when you get started with a startup is to lose the momentum. It's like to slow down and not making progress. There is this idea that you need to move fast and you need to try a lot of things, whether it's the problem, the audience, the go-to-market strategies, the pricing, everything you're going to do and you're going to try to figure out, basically. But I think the main problem that you usually face when you get started is just you lose this motivation, you lose this momentum, right? And so for us, joining YC very early on was just a way to make sure we didn't lose it and we just like keep pushing. So we joined, I would say 4 months after we left our jobs. We basically had a very bare bone product, like alpha-ish, not even beta, like 3 features, I think, that barely worked. And we applied and got in. We learned a lot there. So I can go through the learnings, maybe the main things we learned there. I can also talk a little bit about the timing. I think in fairness, I think it was super early for June. I think it was a little bit too early even. So I can talk about that too if you want, or I don't know where you want me to go right now.
Yeah, actually, I would love to know. First, I think a good question would just be, you mentioned early. I think that's a really important thing because I think a lot of people understand that very often YC people come in with just ideas or they might have more heavily baked products. But I think a lot of this advice might be more, it depends on what you're doing and what you're building. Are you in hardware? Are you in software? But yeah, I'd love to just hear, why did you feel like it was a little bit early? Because you still had a solid idea and you had something built. You're a technical founder. And then after you kind of talk about that, I would love to just hear what were some of the maybe more surprising or unexpected things that you learned from YC, whether it was the process, what you were growing into, something about the experience.
Yeah, 100%. So maybe one thing between when we were working at Intercom and YC, I think we were good at validating the problem. So I think there is a lot of things along the way that help us build some confidence that there was a big problem that needed to be solved, and that wasn't still solved. It wasn't only us. So we went through some discovery exercise. We were actually doing that in the morning, early in the evening, or on the weekend. We run, I think, 80 interviews, something around that. And that's how we zoom into this, basically problem space and realize there was something very chunky. And I think this is how we built the confidence that, it was worth kind of leaving our secure job to do it, right?
Yeah.
So it's always very hard to leave a job. I think it's probably like the hardest thing to do is like actually to take that leap of faith. But I think there's some ways you can actually reduce the uncertainty. So having the problem yourself is always great, but you might be the only person in the world that think like that. So you need to be you need to be careful, and starting some discovery on the side of the job. I think it's something that is totally fine to do, and just a way to reduce the risk, right? So for June, we did that. Then we started to build, and the reason, and we got into YC with an alpha product, which was totally fine. Again, we didn't lie. We just showed the demo. It was just bare bone. And I think they were excited for us to kind of incubate. The problem with YC is that it only lasts 3 months. And during these 3 months, you're going to basically push very, very hard. So I always say that YC doesn't last more than that because you can't, humanly speaking. It's just too hard. It's too intense. And so they really want to accelerate you, to put you on this trajectory, and then keep that pace and make that the default way of working of your company. The problem is that you don't accelerate the same way at every stage of your company. If you're like in the ideation phase, right? You're just drawing like the first wireframe. You can't really accelerate here. You just have to pick one. Maybe you can draw faster, or maybe you can build it faster. But the early days just take a lot of time, right? Once you have like a machine that kind of works, so you have a product and an early audience and an early go-to-market strategy, this is where you can really accelerate. You can build a bit more product or sell your product to actually a lot more people. Selling is actually much faster than building. So oftentimes what YC is going to help you do is just like sell what you have already and just try to repeat that at scale, right? But we didn't have that, and that's why we just had like a bare bone product with like 50 users or something like that. And that's what I mean by it was a bit early. So oftentimes I think a good timing to join YC is you have a product, you have an early audience, you don't necessarily need to monetize. I think less than 50% of the latest batch made a single dollar before the join, and you shouldn't be too late stage. I would say after Series A, YC is like very debatable. I think after Series A, you know where you're going, and I'm not sure you need the advice of a partner every week. So that's about the timing. And now I can talk a bit about the learnings we have if you want.
Yeah, but I just want to like reiterate that because I think it's an important aspect for people to remember. It's like number one, like you want to have that idea or at least that kernel of an idea, but the goal of that 3-month period is to really accelerate, and you have to be thinking about through the lens of your product and like what you're doing. Are you able to use that time to actually accelerate? Because if you're trying to like spin your tires on the idea and you haven't really validated at least the initial idea, then you're not going to get nearly as far through that period, and you're going to kind of again like that from the what I've heard from people like you and others is. That is the value, is the acceleration and the advice and the guidance you get, and then kind of like the fundraising and stuff that can come after. So I think it's a good question that founders should be asking themselves is like, are we ready to really do this kind of acceleration, or do we need a bit more exploration? Do I have to have more conversations before we go into this?
100%. And the acceleration doesn't have to be just making money, right? I think the great thing with YC is like at the end of the 3 months, you know if you're into something or not. Either you took the wrong path and you pivoted, or you took the right path and you accelerated. And so you know, right? So you're going to save a lot of time, like months or years of your life, which is great. But I just think that if you already know that you're going in the right direction and it takes like maybe a couple of more months to get started, maybe wait for that couple of more months to, to apply to YC or such an accelerator. Another perspective on YC is just like a hacker house. Like, you go in the south of the US or south of Europe and you go in a hacker house for like a couple of months to just, accelerate. Probably the best moment to do that is when you have a little something that you can bring from 0 to 1.
Yeah, I love that. But yeah, you're gonna talk a little bit about some of the learnings, or whether it was surprising or unexpected. I'd love to hear some of those for you and June.
Yeah, it's fun. So I mean, before YC is pretty strong because I think they share all their learnings online. And so if you go on the YouTube channel, it's just a gold mine. Same with their website. And so in the beginning, when we started, we got often the answer we would get to a question was, check this video, check this link. And Ferruccio and I would be like, WTF? Like we just gave away X% of the company, and they're showing like they're putting us to like online resources. And I think this is actually when we realized the actual value of the accelerator. It's just like to do the exercise. There is a big difference between I'm supposed to launch before I'm comfortable with, like this code that says, if you're not embarrassed when you launch, you haven't launched early enough. There is a difference between that and actually launching the ugliest website on earth and like crying your ass, So, and this is what YC is doing. Like literally for us, we wanted to launch 1 month into YC. So we had a freelance designer designing it, and then we found a contractor to do the website integration, and we're building the onboarding of the product, and everything was supposed to converge after 1 month for our big launch, and where we were going to be super successful and happy and blah, blah, blah. Turned out we launched 5 days after we joined, after a conversation where basically our partner told us like, okay, so you gave me 10 things you want to do. Can you cut 9? And we're like, yeah, you can cut 9, but it's becoming very, sloppy basically. And our partner told us like, okay, well, if you can do it, you should do it, because you only have 3 months with us. And so if you spend already a third of that just building your website, you're gonna not get the most out of it, We ended up doing that. It was very painful. I think it was a good decision at the time.
Yeah, it's funny you mentioned like, cut 9 of those. I've heard the phrase before. A founder starting a company needs to be thinking like an order of magnitude less is what an actual minimum viable product is. It's not the 15 or 20 features, it's literally like 2 or 3. And that's a very hard thing for a lot of founders to do when you have this big grand vision. There's this thing that you want to see manifested, you want it to be good. So kind of getting that peer pressure and also that push to do that, I think is great. Before we move into the next one, last topic around YC was just any general advice for folks who were going to go apply and wanted to get in, any maybe insider tips or anything like that?
Yeah, so actually I did 2 videos only about this topic because it came all the time. So I need to build videos and just share them so that people can just, get a lot more value from me than just me repeating myself. So you can go on YouTube after a while and you just type Enzo Avigo how to get into YC. But I think the main one I got is I think when you do the written application, I think there is a way to write YC applications. It needs to be very snappy. You need to sound smart. You need to be very straight to the point. And I think until you have had other people review your application or you've seen other applications of people that got into, I think it's very hard to know what's the format. And the way I call it is like just sound smart. Like don't brag, don't sound over smart or too straightforward or simple. Just in the middle. So that's for the written application. Then also the interview is 10 minutes. It's really weird. They just hammer you with questions and you have to answer in like 10 to 15 seconds max. This is just a Google format, to be honest. They ask you not to train. And I don't think you should train too much, otherwise you're not going to sound natural. But I think training, like we rehearse like one or twice at least, is just a good practice. So probably these are the two main high-level advice I have for people.
Yeah, no, that's great advice. I've heard some of the same things, and yeah, folks, feel free to. We have some information in the doc section here about Enzo's YouTube channel. There's some great stuff on there. Cool. So we're going to start to move into the discussion around kind of product market fit, and I'm also looking at kind of the results of the poll right here, and it looks like overwhelming majority are either bootstrapped, pre-seed, or seed. There's a few. There's like one or two in there from Series A plus. So that's it's I think a really good alignment to a lot of the kind of discussion we're going to start to move into. So first, you've been building and growing June now for about 3 years, if I remember correctly, and we just talked about it, but I've seen you publish a lot of really thoughtful content around not just the journey that June has had, but this kind of journey you've been on to find product market fit. So we're going to talk a bit about that, but first, how do you kind of like personally define what product market fit is for a company like yours?
Yeah, that's a great point. So there's something really interesting about the product we're building, which is that we help a lot of people reach PMF through a sequence of steps. And basically in June, you can see like stuff such as your number of active users or your retention and things like that, which are very good proxies of product market fit. And so as we know, we've been building this product and helping people use it and like basically, becoming successful in their life in general including with that product. One thing we'll learn, and I was super surprised, is that PMF is very progressive. Some people will reach it overnight and it's just like these crazy success stories you hear about. Or some people were going to tell you like one day they didn't have it and one day they had it, which is kind of true, right? Because eventually one day they didn't have it and one day they had it. But the one thing that I think a lot of people are missing is that it's progressive. So it's just like you build a product which has like one feature and it's not enough. You give it to people and basically these people are never going to come back. And maybe there is one out of these people that come back, and then you build a second feature or you iterate a bit on your positioning, on things around your product, and eventually you're improving. And one day things look good, right? And this is the whole lean startup thingy, right? Like you launch something very fast and you iterate. I think this is very important to understand with lean startup is that if you're launching something fast and you're going to iterate, it also means that the chance that you have a strong PMF from day one are like super, super little, and this is the main learning I've had. And this is one of the main things I've been sharing about. And I think a lot of people have, clicked with this thing because they realize like, oh yeah, that's actually exactly what we went through. So it's kind of like, it's an interesting story. So I think PMF is like a spectrum. I don't think it's binary. And I think most of the definition you hear in your day-to-day are the end of the spectrum. So for me, there is a spectrum from like, you haven't built anything to, you can't sleep at night and things are scaling super fast and you can't even hire people fast enough. And in between, there's just a lot of steps. So the first step, in my opinion, is the interviews. When you have an hypothesis about the problem you want to solve and you reach out to people to understand if they have the problem and if you can jump on the call or they can explain the problem at writing, whatever. If you have like a huge majority of people that don't want to talk to you, then I think it's a red flag. You can argue that these people are too busy or they don't understand that the problem or blah, blah, blah. But there is a big chance that they just don't have the problem, or the problem is not big enough for them to give you some time. And so I think this is like already an insight, a validation of like you're onto something, right? I realized that way later. I think when we started the interviews at June, we got something around 40 or 50% response rate that were positive. And I think that was like an insight, like a really strong signal that people wanted to talk about their data issues and things like that. I think then there is a next step. Okay, I will pause here because
I love that, because I think like I know, like I've talked to some founders before, and it's like, how do I validate this, or what should I do? And my response is usually go find the people that you think you're going to be selling to. Like, try and get that right, and then go talk to them on LinkedIn, a quick 1-sentence email. If you are actually hitting on a problem, like I've gotten these on LinkedIn, which is like, hey, I'm building this thing that does X. Do you want to talk? And sometimes I'll see something and go like, whatever, maybe I'll like talk to them. Other times I'll think like, yes, because if I had that product, like I would want to use it and buy it. So you can look at your like cold email or cold call kind of like response rates as one metric. If you have not built something yet, if you're in the ideation stage, that this is a really great opportunity for you to like continue on this path. Just make sure you're asking the right people and saying the right things. But assuming that's the case, then that's a great proxy.
And I think you mentioned the 3 important things, right? Like, are you talking about the right problem? Are you talking to the right people? So for instance, when we started June, we're talking about like data issues with data, and then we're talking to data analysts and to product managers and to engineers. These people are like completely different problems. And then there is the next piece, which is, are you talking to early adopters, right? So maybe you're solving the right problem, maybe you're looking at the right people, but maybe these people are not early adopters of technologies. Like, they just like want to play it safe, which is totally fine, and they don't want to switch or potentially waste time to try a new solution, right? And so it's a very hard puzzle that you need to assemble, right? And that's why, it's so important, going back to what we said earlier, that's why it's so important to have an opinion, a vision, or some time to solve your own problem, is because the space is going to be so big. The amount of problems you can solve are so broad. Same with the personas you can go for, that if you try all the combinations, it might take a lifetime. And there was a post I did once on LinkedIn where I literally did the math for that. Like, let's say you go after a problem space and there's like 10 potential sub problems, and you think there is like 4 personas, and you want to build a prototype like for 2 weeks to validate one of the problem/persona combination, then it can take like 10 years, I think, or 15 years to just try the combination for the problem space you're in, right? This is scary. Like, no one has this time, and no one wants to invest this time into finding a early combination that maybe will put you on the track to PMF. Because after you figure this out, you have to figure the strategy, you have to figure the go-to-market, and hopefully you have to figure out if your market is as big as you thought it was. So there's a lot of planets you need to align.
Yeah, no, totally. And I think, again, going back to like, you have this big idea and trying to distill that down into like what is the hook that's going to get people in, because it depends on what space you're in. If you're in a product analytics space like you, there's a lot of incumbents, there's a lot of people doing this. And so what your value to a lot of people might be is doing one specific thing really well, or a certain level of simplicity, or whatever it might be. The way to capture that product market fit might be much more incremental. You talked about that spectrum of what PMF is, and it's like eventually you're going to hit part of it, but then it's going to, there's no end point, right? That's just going to keep expanding out. And you're going to have to keep reinventing and keep pushing on it because new people come in, right? Technology changes. Like, think about AI and how that's impacted so many industries and kind of forcing people to rediscover their own product market fit. If you have a much more niche product or something truly new, then you might be able to find that it's a little bit easier because you might be one of the only few players. And so your response might be a stronger of an indicator. So again, a lot of the kind of like those key moments that are going to give you that insight, whether you found it or not, are going to be dependent on the type of industry and product that you're working on.
Exactly. Yeah. And here it's a hard balance, right? Because the bigger the market or the more established, the more incumbent they will be, most likely. So, but the easier is the PMF, because the market is validated. So you have a lot of entrepreneurs, they always tell you like, go for a big market. That's the easiest way to get a PMF, right? But at the same time, the bar is higher, so you need to build more. And then there are the greenfields markets, where basically, if you enter the market the first or the second, you're going to get a lot of shares really quickly. But the risk of opening this market or finding this market is much higher, right? And so I think it's a very it's a different type of entrepreneurs that do that.
Yeah,
And I
you have to
think,
know. Sorry, on that point, I think like you have to. Like, very often, I've found that people that do that well are people who are solving a problem that they themselves have experienced for a long time. Because what you have to be asking yourself is, if nobody else is doing this thing, what do they know that I don't know, or what do I know that they don't know, right? And I think
right.
that's the kind of thing. It's like if you know that there's a problem that hasn't been solved, that's fine. But if it's a big market and nobody's doing it, you have to start to ask that question of like, is there something that I'm missing here, the information that I don't have about this market or a cost or like industry regulations or something along those lines.
100%. But I would argue for the people listening that wonder if they should go in the brown market or the red market or greenfield market, I would argue that there is no good or bad answer here. Because like, if the barrier at entry is really high, when you enter that market, you might also take it away really quickly. You might like just conquer that market really quickly, right? So I think Notion is a great example. They took ages to enter the document/wiki market, but like they were like a deflagration, right? Like they just spread like fire, and now they're just like everywhere, right? I think one thing that we've seen building June is that there's just no analytics companies launching every year. Like when we launch, we're like, okay, awesome. Who are we going to benchmark? There is no one. No one goes into this market, so it's very hard to enter. But once you're in, you can look in the gear. There's just very little, companies following you, and that's the barrier at entry is like two ways, right? It's hard to enter, but once you are on the other side of the fence, it's also hard to follow you. So that might be also a good reason to do it.
Yeah, I love it. Continuing on this, so do you like maybe this is a tough question, but do you think that June? Would you say that you've like achieved product market fit? And maybe like part two to that question is, what have been some of the most kind of standout things that you've learned from June's journey in regards to kind of like finding that product market fit, whether it was early, later, today?
Yeah, great question. So I'll go very quickly through what I think are the next steps of PMF, and I'll tell you where we're at. So I think you start with the questions, or like just like you have nothing to give to people. You just want to take their time and kind of like share your thoughts. That's the step one. I think things change when you can give people something tangible, because now that you're not just taking their time, they're envisioning a potential future with your solution. So when you prototype and you give prototype, or you ask if they want to be your beta users and so on, now they're giving you time, and you put them in a different state of the world where they have to, I would say, believe a lot more in what you are going after to give you that time. Like an interview is half an hour is nothing. Like giving me 10 minutes for my product every week, that's another kind of commitment, right? And I think at the end of that, you have like the ongoing usage, active usage, and then of course the monetization. And I think the monetization is the moment of truth where you realize if everything you've been going after can be monetized. It can be direct monetization, you ask people money, or it can be indirect monetization. You may have some advertising in your platform and stuff like that. At this point of time, you have a segment of people that want to buy your product, but PMF means it's repeatable and it scales, right? So at this point of time, what you're going to look at is the growth. And typically for a SaaS like June, it's going to be the month-over-month growth revenue. So typically the monthly recurring revenue, the MR. And so there was a great article from Paul Graham who said that anything between 10 and 20% month-over-month of growth for many, many months is a really strong signal of PMF. So I think in Insight, if you look at this whole story, which I call crossing the desert, and then kind of climbing that mountain and make sure it's repeatable, and you get the month-over-month growth, I think we have the PMF. And June has it. I think where we don't necessarily have it is because I think there's another definition, which is like the Anderson Horowitz definition, which is when you have PMF, you can't sleep. Like literally, it's like Uber, like these guys couldn't even go back home on the weekend and so on. I don't know if this has to do a bit more with the hustling culture, which we don't necessarily have at June. I think we try to be a bit balanced, even though it's very hard. We can talk about that in the marketing section. It's very hard when you're a founder into marketing to have a balanced life. I don't think we have this like what I call explosive PMF. Like I think Enzo Avigo can go to bed at night, but I think the rest we have it. And so the main learning again is that it just some PMF just takes time. And in our space there was, as you said, quite some incumbent, and so it did take us a lot of time. And so I think having this clear vision of a problem not being solved and a new way of solving it being needed was what really helped us, keep pushing where when we weren't at a strong PMF yet.
Yeah, it sounds almost like you have to have a clear idea of what success will look like or when you will find that. Like being honest with yourself, but also setting clear expectations that you don't have to be a breakout success. You don't have to have that kind of moment. It's for most companies, it's like most companies aren't successful, right? Most startups fail. You have to have like that same mindset. Like for everybody that does find product market fit, yeah, maybe there's one company that had that kind of overnight success, which is usually not overnight success, by the way. It's usually something that's taken them like months or years to get to. But you don't have to have that. You can have this kind of slow and steady growth, and oftentimes that can be more sustainable as you go through.
I think there is a great article. I'm sure a lot of product folks are in this room listening. There is a great article from Lenny Raczynski. He has this amazing Substack newsletter I'm sure a lot of people have heard about. And he has this amazing article where he explains the time to PMF. And I think it's pretty fascinating to see a lot of the products you love and use and how many years they took. And I think the most fascinating thing for me in this article is the relationship between the go-to-market motion and the time to PMF. So basically, a lot of products that have a short PMF, like 2-3 years, basically, have a sales-led motion. Like you just sell something you don't have with like one of the founders typically, and you see if people buy it. And if they do buy it, then basically you build it and then you repeat that a couple of times and you have kind of your early PMF, right? When you have a product-led motion, it's a totally different game because you need to figure out how people are going to hear about you, or you need to build a product that is so good that it will be word of mouth. Then you need to build an onboarding. Like a great onboarding in B2B SaaS is at least a year of work, of iteration. Like at least that's what I learned. And then you need to have like a product which is so good and so well architected that there will be some kind of like self-serve activation. People will figure out the value and how to use it and so on. And this requires a lot of fine-tuning, right? And so for product like Coda and Notion, we're talking about like 5-6 years. Figma is the same. It's like 5, 6, 7 years. It's like crazy. And you look at that. So it's not only like June or the customers we're working with. It's literally like the best companies you've been following, right? Intercom is a bit different. Intercom, Mark, I don't know if you remember the story, but I think they basically launched the chat, and within a couple of months, things took off, right?
Yeah. There's some good articles out there. I think on the Intercom blog about like what the kind of like founding stories if people are interested. But it's fascinating, but it's also pretty typical. And I'm glad that you just did a perfect transition for me into like our next topic. But I think there's a big question that's on a lot of people's mind. I know when I had started my company, it was like, how the hell do you get people to notice you, to find your website, to find your content, to sign up and try your product? Like there's so much crap advice out there, but it's also like it's a true challenge for a lot of people, especially if you're a founder who's much more technical, or if you don't have kind of like a marketing or go-to-market background. And the marketing landscape has changed a lot over the past like 3, 5, 10 years. So number one, I would love to move into kind of this discussion point about founder-led marketing. And I know I'm personally really excited to hear your take on it because I know you've spoken about it a bit, and I think this is kind of something that you've been actually doing at June. So first, for the people who might not be familiar, can you just give us like that rundown of what is founder-led marketing, and after that, why do you think it's starting to become a little bit more popular?
Yeah, so great question. So basically, we talk about product market fit, product market. What's in between the product and the market? It's the distribution. It's like, what are you using to distribute your product, right? And so I think the reason why we got into that is because June is a self-serve product, meaning that the motion that works the best for us, or is the most efficient, is like inbound marketing. It's driving people to the website. And it's due to our financials. Like if I need to hire a salesperson and pay the salary of a salesperson to then convince people through outbound to onboard on June, and then the ACV is like people pay like 100, 200, 300 bucks per month for June. I'm losing money all the time, basically. June would be losing money, right? So we basically ought to basically figure out marketing. The other reasons why we're starting to do that is because our vision of the world is a world where analytics is simple. And so for us, this kind of self-serve motion wasn't just like, oh, it would be cool if we could be product-led, whatever, but like an actual statement of the world will be better if you don't have to talk to your sales to adopt a new generation analytics like June, right? And so that's why we started like that. Like it was part of the vision, right? Going into that direction, we started to do marketing. And as the CEO of June, I started to be the person doing marketing. And so I started to do a lot of things online, including on LinkedIn, Twitter, and so on. One thing we realized very quickly is that people prefer to follow people rather than brands, which I was super surprised because every time I worked for companies, it was all about the brands, you know? And I think there's a shift operating. It's not a 180 shift, right? It's like slowly moving where we want more authenticity, you know, in everything we do, in everything we consume. And I think the same is happening to B2B. And it's very exciting to see happening, right? And so that's what happened to us. We entered a world where myself as the first kind of like go-to-market person that was working on marketing initiative became kind of the face, one of the face of the company of what we call founder-led marketing.
Yeah, I was making a couple like mental notes there. You mentioned a couple of things. One, you mentioned people want to be following people, and you also mentioned like authenticity. And I know when we were kind of like preparing for some of this stuff, you know, my background is in marketing. I started a company, but this seems to me to be a natural progression of kind of like the B2B content marketing world, right? You know, way back, marketing was just synonymous with advertising. Then you kind of have like Web 2.0, the rise of social media, and then there's also this kind of rise in thought leadership blogs, right? But they were all centered around these companies, and I think like educational content from like a truly established leader in a space, right? Think like HubSpot. I think for a while, like Intercom was like this. It was useful because there wasn't as much readily available content out there for these things. And I think what we've all seen, not just with generative AI, but even before then, that content started to really become commoditized. The quality starts to drop off, and you know, people kind of realize it's a very self-serving model. Like it's the companies are going to say what they want to say to kind of get you to buy their product, and you know, it's just more available, right? So they start to kind of, there's a bit of an air of distrust, I think, or just like a lack of like authenticity with a lot of that. And so I know that like even in the space you mentioned, like Lenny, right? There's no shortage of influencers, and the people also know that, you know, influencers can also be pay to play depending on the industry. It's a very common tactic, right? And so I think what we're really just seeing is people want to relate to somebody if somebody is genuine, if they seem like they know what they're doing, right? Like, you know, Enzo's been successful at June, right? Like he seems to know what he's talking about. Like I want to follow this person because they know what they're talking about, and I can kind of relate to that and kind of get this like these great insights from them, right? And then the next thing is, then maybe I'll check out their product if I need, you know, like an analytics platform. So I guess I feel like it's as long as you can show that you know what you're talking about, you have that experience with the cloud, or you've built something, and if you can be genuine and not be that like kind of like salesy person, I think you can kind of gain a really strong, and it takes time, like, you know, it time to like build and iterate to like build that following. But I think that's what we're starting to see more, is just coming from a place where people wanted to be more genuine.
Totally agree. And I think there is something about the how hard it is to produce some kind of content. Like I think as soon as some content is easy to produce or can be industrialized, I think other people will start to do it, and it will lose its value, its inherent value, or its value in the eyes of the people. Whereas when something is extremely hard to do, there will be less people doing it, and it will be perceived as higher value. So, like in our case, a founder that finds the time to do content, that is perceived as value because it's like an unfiltered access to a founder, right? A blog being run by a team, the quality might be actually better than the founder, you know, but it's just that, you know, there is like 20 people that are hired to do that, and you know, every week they come up with topics they brainstorm, prioritize, write it, make sure there is no typo, send it to an illustrator, and you know, your eyes just get used to that. I think there's something about renewing the content, the type of content, and just the production also. I think the production cost also is very important. Like what we're doing right now. I hope people like it. It's not easy to set up one of these live webinar, to get the camera you have at Intercom, things like that. I think these things make the difference, right? So I think there's also something to be said a little bit about even the format itself and what it takes a company to be able to produce this kind of format. And if you're the only one in the world to do it, I think you have more chance to resonate with people.
Yeah, that's a great point. And I think that's one thing to get across to people is there's two things you have to be thinking about: is what is the substance of the content, what you're saying? Is it useful? Is it valuable? Is it valuable to your audience? Like, if you're saying the things that they care about, you'll know, right? Like, you hit that pretty quickly. But the other part has almost nothing to do with your content. It's about how do you get it in front of people. So you could have the most interesting like thing to say in the world, like a super interesting insight that nobody else has, but if you just slap it on a corporate blog, people might not want to pay attention to that. So you have to make sure that you're find an interesting thing to say, but also make sure that you're getting it in front of people in a way that they want to consume it, and iterate on that. Because that is like, it's useless if nobody's going to be able to find it and consume it and like interact with it.
100%. One thing we talk about, maybe that would be interesting for people. The chance with content compared to product is that it's much easier, much faster. Not easier, but much faster to produce. So a LinkedIn post or a YouTube video is going to be much faster to produce than a feature, most likely, right? Depends on the feature, of course. So you can just get a lot of feedback a lot faster with the content you produce. And I think I've treated that as a product, to be honest, the content, and I think it's been super useful. There's some stuff I write about, I love it. I'm like so bought into it. I share it, no one cares. And then there's this stuff that I know people like to read about from me, and I'm like, I'm forcing myself from time. I'm like, okay, I need to push that a little bit further. Like, what is one thing I haven't talked about in this topic? And sometimes I figure out good stuff, and like people like it, and I'm like, okay, that's the point of like good content. Like you're writing for the people, you're not only writing for yourself. So I think it's super important to listen to the signals that people give you on your content. So it can be comments on the content, on the blog, on the post you do on social, things like that. If you post on Hacker News, it can be the discussion that is triggered from that. Here, like the comments, I'm going to read all the comments after that. Like very honestly, I think I really value the stuff that people say on these webinars.
Yeah, no, well, first plus one to that, people don't realize like we comb through these questions and comments, and it's all like super useful. So I promise if you post it, we're going to read it. So I know we're getting a little bit close. We want to have some time for questions. I've got a few more, but on this topic of kind of the founder-led marketing, I would love to just hear if somebody wants to get started in doing this, like what is some kind of maybe, whether it's general, specific advice, any kind of advice you have for them, and then and that can be also resources if there's like a resource you want to point them to, and also if there's anybody that you've seen doing this that you think maybe people should check out as like a really clear example of good founder-led marketing.
So much to say. I mean, first thing is your content is like a product. You should launch as fast as possible, and no one will remember what you launch. No one will remember your first blog post, your first LinkedIn post, your first video. Like, it's going to be embarrassing, but trust me, it doesn't matter. So just press the release button, the publish button. I think that's, again, the best advice I could give you. I just started my YouTube channel again. The first video is so embarrassing. It's not 6 months old. Huh? The first video is like a month old. It's so embarrassing, like really, really embarrassing. I did the thumbnail. The thumbnail is embarrassing too. It doesn't matter. Now I kind of learned all the mistakes I did, and I'm moving forward. I think that's super important. One question that a lot of people ask is, how do you get the ideas for your content? And I think there is something to know about that, which is that the creativity is not something you can command. It's not something you can say, I want to be creative, I want to think about ideas. So you need to let that door open all the time. And every time you have a good idea, you should drop it on a G-Doc, or an Apple Note, whatever, so that when you're in the process of creating content, you don't have this paralysis of like, what am I going to write about? So it's very, very important to unblock that creativity door. Otherwise, the processes behind, which is basically you produce the content, can't happen. So this one helped me a lot. I think I saw some like YouTube videos that explain that really, really well. I think Gary Vee is the one who talks the best about content. I love Gary Vee. I never watched Gary Vee before. for me, he was like this awkward YouTuber. And now I basically watch him every week, and he has such great points. He's like such a great content creator and a great marketer, honestly. And then the other piece, maybe of feedback on content creation, is to close the loop, like to listen to what people say to you. Like, one of the reasons why I wrote an entire book on on product market fit and rigid product market fit is because I initially shared last year 2 LinkedIn posts about this topic, and they weren't super viral. Like, I think the 2 posts made 2 million impressions. And in the beginning, I was like, oh, that's cool. Things that like sometimes go viral. And then I kept writing about it, and I was like, holy crap, like no one wrote about this stuff. Like, and that's why people liked it, So that didn't come from me. It was just like one more topic I wanted to write about, but the people told me it was something interesting and they wanted to hear about, right? So close the loop. I think it's super important, I think, here. And again, I start to watch, man, these really weird YouTube creators, and I find a lot of value in them. Honestly, I think the best content creators right now are on YouTube. TikTok is really strong, but it's very short, very edited, very staged. YouTube, you can have people like releasing like 20, 30 minutes a week. And I'm not sure people know how much editing this is, but it's so much work to script, record, edit, polish, and publish videos on YouTube once or twice a week. It's insane.
Yeah, no, I totally agree. And I'm going to just like plus one to your idea of publishing content more often than you think. And I know sometimes I've posted, I every once in a while I record like a loom of me building something at Intercom, whether it's like a content, a startup program, or like webinar stuff, partner marketing. And sometimes it's an idea that I think is good, and like other people also like it. And other times I post something that I think is great and nobody cares. And then there'll be that thing that you're like, oh, like everybody seemed to really be into that. And that kind of gives you that, it's the same idea as like being iterative with like what product you're building is. You have to find that like little nugget kernel of like a good idea in your content, and then like double down on it and like keep pushing on it and keep evolving it.
But I love these videos you're making. And you know what? It doesn't matter, because early on you have your early adopters. So the same way you have early adopters of product that are going to like your product even though it's not great, it's the same with your content. A lot of people are going to like Mark's content, not because it's great, but because we like you. And it's good. It's good enough. It's a good enough reason for you to get some early motivation and to keep pushing. And us, the early adopters who like Mark, are going to help the algorithm promote you so that more people that don't know Mark will come with a higher expectation, of course. And then it's your chance to seduce them and build something useful for them, right? It's exactly like a product. And I think it's, I've seen you doing that, and I think it's really good.
Oh, thanks, man. And it's just good practice, good writing practice, good video practice and everything. Well, look, I know you've got a hard stop. And so we got a couple questions. If anybody wants to post more questions go ahead and into the Q&A, drop them in there. Enzo, I'll start just really quickly with, was there anything that we didn't get to today, or that that you would want to like talk about, or any advice you want to kind of impart on anybody listening right now?
Wow. I mean, we touch on a lot of things. There's a lot we haven't touched on, to be honest. I mean, funnel-led marketing, I just think I need to say it before people jump into that, can be a slog. As soon as you become one of the face of your company, or one of the core forces basically to promote, to publish content, you might also become the bottleneck, and you might have extra pressure. So I think it's one of the reasons why so many people don't want to do funnel-led marketing. Is just like, it can be really hard. It can put a lot of pressure on you. So people need to know that. And
you're putting yourself out there. I think people too, there's an emotional aspect to that, which is like, you're like, here I am. People aren't always nice on the internet.
Yeah, very strong. But some channels are nicer than others. Like, I think on YouTube people are very nice. Overall, they emotionally connect with you because of the format. I think on LinkedIn people are very positive. I think Twitter is definitely the hardest place right now. Like, it happens to me to post on LinkedIn and Twitter. Everyone is like super supportive on LinkedIn. I have my best life. And then I go on Twitter and people are like, oh, dude, I didn't know you had such a bad life right now. Like, you feel very depressed, And I'm like, it's the same post, but on the one hand, it's interpreted as a bad life. And on the people are very criticize really strongly on X, right?
No, I hear that. One of the questions from the audience, as a founder, was there anything that really drove home the message that you need to strip your idea down to the minimal nature of product market fit?
Could you repeat, like, what do you mean by the nature? Do you understand that?
So like what, like you have to strip down your idea initially to kind of like find that product market fit. Like what drove home the message that you needed to do that? Like when you as founders, you want to build a bunch of stuff, how do you just kind of like, what made it be like, no, I got to focus and hone in on that thing, that one thing?
Yeah. So one thing that helped us a lot was to think about the category of a product. So basically, whether you want it or not, whether you're building something that exists or doesn't exist, you're going to be perceived as a little something that exists in the life of the people, right? And so that little something, hopefully something small enough so that it does a job, solves a problem, right? But big enough so that, people can identify you as the solution for the little problem, right? And so, and then hopefully they map a price they're willing to pay for that solution, right? And so I always find it very weird and hard to figure out what's the minimum set of things you put in that box, right? Like Shazam is a product, you open Shazam and you can just Shazam a song, it's one button, right? And with that feature, they already had PMF. No login, no ways to look at your old song that you Shazam. Now it's a social network, and you can do stuff, you can buy tickets to go see concerts. They had PMF with just the button, right? June was not like that. June was like an analytics. So for us, we had to build like 5 or 6 features. And the reason, the moment we had PMF is when we had this category, which was the analytics. People started to basically put June in a box where they knew they could rely on June for their analytics. They were like, okay, now I know I can pay for you because I know I can use you and I can stay. And if I have an extra question which is weird, I can still use you to answer that weird question. And so that's the thing I think that was a threshold for us and seems to be the threshold for so many products, is how many features do you need to pile to basically become that little thingy which in the minds of the people resonate as its own category that people will want to use. And I'm very, very bought into this idea that you can't cross too much between categories. So instead, like, I think Shazam is great because you use it for job A, which is like to detect a song. I think it would have been very hard for Shazam to reach PMF if from the get-go they wanted to be the only tool that you use to find the song and I don't know,
concert discovery or something. It's like new music exploration or something like that.
Exactly. They were perceived as this little job, basically. Job to be done, we call them at Intercom, right?
Yep.
I haven't seen a framework for that, by the way. If someone wants to write about this one, I've been thinking about it a lot. I think it's an amazingly complex problem of like how many features you need to pile to become your own thing so that people identify you as the thing they can buy to do that job, and it's enough for them to consider you as the solution for it.
Yeah, love it. All right, look, we got 3 minutes left. Let's try and do a couple more rapid fire. And anybody, if we don't get to a question, I promise Enzo or I will, hopefully Enzo, so you don't have to listen to me. We'll respond to it in writing. First one, what channels have you had the most success with in terms of acquisition? LinkedIn, Twitter, Product Hunt, Facebook, etc.
Yes. Okay, I'll do quick ones. Word of mouth is number one. We see acquisition at June like gears, and there is a big gear and there are small gears, and everything we do is pushing a smaller gear that push bigger ones that ultimately push the biggest one, which is the word of mouth. So what works the best for June is word of mouth. Everything else is like making the machine, start. And it's because when people recommend you, it's like just super powerful. You would really listen to them, right? Then what works in terms of acquisition to turn on that gear is basically social media a lot for us, LinkedIn and Twitter being the top 2.
Love it. How do you manage your time, content creation, and sharing my experience is a space that I really want to be in? I've already many responsibilities being a CEO, thinking about the product, marketing, customers. This is endless, but how do you manage your time?
Latest YouTube video, man. I keep pointing to YouTube. Latest video, YouTube on video is exactly about that. I prioritize my manager agenda. So every time I can delegate an someone is the priority, because I can get more out of the box, out of the door, sorry. And then I prioritize my maker agenda, which is the things I do. And I keep the moment with the peak of energy for me to do that. And it's in the morning for me. So I have like 3 hours blocker every morning to produce content. The rest is like managing or enabling people, because we're a startup, I don't really manage. And then it's like buffer, what I call buffer slots. I explain them in the YouTube video. It's just like slots where I don't do anything, because anyway, my agenda is going to be a chaos otherwise. So I just react to whatever happens.
Love it. All right. I know, Enzo, we got a hard stop. You got a flight to catch, if I remember correctly. Thank you so much for being here. For everybody watching, we're going to be sharing the recording. We'll be doing a post on LinkedIn with some of these resources. We'll answer any questions we didn't get to, but thank you everybody for joining us. And please give us your feedback. Enzo, you're amazing. Thank you for your time, man. I appreciate it.
Thanks, man. You're the one who is amazing. Thanks so much for coming, everyone. It's so glad to be connected, and you can follow up on LinkedIn and email if you want. So thank you so much again.
Cheers, everybody.